This is not a cactus. And I know what you're thinking. Of course it is. It looks just like a cactus. It has all the cactus qualities. It's got the spikes, it's got the arms, it's got the dry, dusty landscape. This is classic cactus. And while up until quite recently I would have completely agreed with you, unfortunately, this is not a cactus. It's called a Euphorbia candelabrum. And I'm making this video because I lost a bet to my wife on whether or not this was a cactus. When I was 17 years old, I moved to Japan to teach kindergarten, which I recognize is a strange direction to take this episode, but please bear with me. I had this one classroom, and at the end of the day in Japan, even as young as 3 years old, you have to act as janitors, and I, as your teacher, have to sort of act as the janitorial manager, forcing these little 3-year-olds to clean up the room, which was both kind of strange, because I certainly didn't grow up cleaning my room, but also absolutely hilarious, because they're like this tall, and they've got the little mop, and they're running around. Anyway, point being, one day, I had this student, a 3-year-old named Kazuki. I called him Kazuchis because he was like this tall and he looked like a mouse and spoke like a mouse. He had this really high-pitched voice. Completely irrelevant to this story, but kind of funny. Anyway, so it was Kazuchis' turn to clean the floor this one day. And cleaning the floor essentially means getting handed a wet rag, sticking your little 3-year-old butt in the air and just running along the floor, sort of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until the entire wood paneling is cleaned. And it was Kazuchi's, I don't know, 50th time doing this. This was definitely not his first go at the floor, but for whatever reason, this one day, he decided he was going to stick his tongue out behind the rag, and as he ran up and down, he was going to lick the entirety of the floor of this room. As a 17-year-old janitorial manager, I did not have a lot of desire to stop this. It was hilarious. It was really funny to watch, and I probably should have in retrospect, but at the time, absolutely didn't. And so when Kazuchis was done licking the entire floor, I was sitting there in the corner, I don't know, having one of his juice boxes or something, laughing at him, and I said to him, Kazuchis, what the hell, man? Why did you just lick the entirety of this room? And he looked at me and said something that, all joking aside, I will never forget. He looked up and said, I just didn't know what it tasted like. When we first got to Ethiopia, my wife and I had a big debate about the cactus. I knew she was going to be right, she's always right, but I decided to stand my ground anyway, because we've been married for 10 years, and that's what you do. But also because this was a cactus. I'd seen it, and I'd believed it. I was wrong, but I had believed it. The world around us is constantly in flux. The continents have crashed and split and crashed again. The mountains have risen and crumbled back to dust. Forests have turned to desert and ocean. There is no stable universe. But even in this giant churning sea of change, nature has rules. Patterns are inevitable. The Euphorbia candelabrum is not a cactus, but it might as well be. Because despite growing an entire world away from the ancestors of cacti, it has existed under similar conditions with similar pressures and similar reasons to be. The same factors that led to the rise of spiky-armed succulents in the Americas led to a similar rise here. Brothers from another mother, or, in the terms my wife explained it to me, convergent evolution. But I'm not a scientist, as I'm sure you well know. I'm not here to explain to you how Darwinism works, or for that matter, the laxative qualities of euphorbia, which is true, by the way. No, I want to talk about expectations, because eventually there comes a time when you stop licking floors and just start imagining that you know what they taste like. I grew up in Texas during my formative years, the type of years where adults feel the need to point out plants and tell you what they're called. There are only so many of those years, and I was in Texas for all of them. To me, the euphorbia was a cactus because I grew up with cactus. It was an experience I'd already had. I expected I knew what I was looking at because I'd looked at something like it before. In effect, I'd licked a floor just like this one, and it had tasted like cactus. One of the most useful and damning tools our brains have is the ability to provide inference. We can abstractly imagine what something will be like in the future simply by stitching together completely different situations from the past. Looks are deceiving, and the fewer experiences we're using to build that puzzle, the weaker our inference will be. Expectations ruin us. They make us stop digging deeper. They make us think we're smarter than we really are. They make us get into pointless debates with our wives, which we lose, by the way. Now, I can only imagine that on that day in Japan, that floor tasted gross. But the only person who knows in reality is Kazuki. Because for all the experience I'd had up until that point in my life, I wasn't willing to give that one a go. And because of it, I was bested by a 3-year-old. I was bested by my wife. What can you do? This is rare earth. You happy? You happy, Cactus? It's not a cactus, it's a euphorbia candelabrum.